All right. First of all, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you guys. I promise today is the last day I wear a monkey suit. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to get behind that side of the bar, and you guys are back here mixing, and I'm going to be much more casual. But good to see y'all. Thank you all for coming yesterday. You know, I lived in New York for 30 years, and I was always told that as you get further north, it's y'all, and you get further. I mean, in New York, it's yous. Hey, how's yous doing? But you get all the way down here in Mississippi, it's how y'all. You just kind of bring it on out. Any questions about anything we talked about yesterday? There's a lot of information, and anything about. Did anybody happen to pick up a bottle and learn something new that you didn't know yesterday? Okay, no problem. So what I'd like to do is do the very, very, very briefest of recaps. I mean, let's see if we can do it in 60 seconds. Probably take 2 minutes, but we're going to blow through it as fast as we can. So all distilled spirits, we first start by making a beer. The way we do that, we need water, yeast, and sugar. So we need some source of raw material to get sugar, whether it's sugar or starches or whatever. We add to a pot of water, whether it's in a pot still or a column still, we add yeast. The yeast gobbles up the sugar, turns it into ethanol alcohol, and now we have a beer. We add heat to that beer, and all the ethanol liquid turns into vapors. It comes across, we condense it and cool it, and now comes alcohol. And a copper pot still comes off at 85% pure alcohol, and a column still comes off at 96% pure alcohol. And so remember, we have the copper pot still and the column or continuous still. And we prefer the copper pot still because we can taste more of that raw material, even though that's old school. The column still is for a very clean, very pure distillate, but has no character or flavor. We talked about vodka. Vodka can be made from just about anything, at least in the U.S. It can be made from anything. It can be made from grapes. It can be made from potatoes or tapioca pearls or anything, sweet potatoes, whatever you want. But most vodkas are made from barley, wheat, corn, or rye, and most of those are made from wheat. So we just distill it, filter it, and remember, every spirit comes off the still clear. We talked about gin. Gin and vodka, essentially the same thing. We make a vodka, and then while we're making it, we either throw in some botanicals, or after it's being distilled, it comes through a separate chamber, or sometimes we can actually infuse flavors after it's distilled. Either way, it's vodka, but we've infused it with botanicals. And botanicals are they have little or no sugar in them. So they're flavoring agents without much sugar. Things like lemon peels, lime peels, coriander, cassia bark, cinnamon, mint, lavender, rose petals, cucumbers, saffron, cumin, whatever you want. There's a million different botanicals. But we put those in there to give it flavor. And that becomes gin, but not until we add the one botanical, which is juniper. Without juniper, it's no longer gin. Then we talked about whiskey, and whiskey is the same thing as vodka and gin. It's made from barley, wheat, corn, and rye, but then we age it in a barrel. And we talked about what a profound influence aging in an oak barrel has on a spirit. It transforms our colorless, flavorless vodka into this golden brown, sweet liquid, which we call whiskey. And there's all kinds of different whiskeys. We talked about the different styles. We won't have to go through all that right now, but we talked about bourbon and rye whiskey and Tennessee whiskey from America. We talked about Canadian whiskey, which has a higher rye content because they're adding neutral grain rye vodka and adding some caramel or sweetness to it, which will probably give you a headache. So Canadian whiskey is not my thing, but you know what? Very popular, and there's also some good Canadian whiskeys as well. And then we talked about Irish whiskey and Scotch whiskey, which tends to have a little bit more barley in there. But they also make it with corn and wheat and rye. And then single malt scotches use 100% malted barley and from a single distillery, and how it comes from Scotland. So, and we talked about Japanese whiskey, blah, blah, blah. Then we all talked about tequila. There's Mixto tequila, which is 51% blue agave. The rest is corn and sugarcane. And there's 100% agave. And we talked about Blanco, which is aged 0 to 60 days, 0 to 59 days. Reposado, 60 days or more. Añejo is 1 year or more. Extra Añejo is 3 years or more. Then Cristalino is 1 year or more, which is an Añejo, but it's filtered so it comes out clear, even though it has all the flavor of an Añejo tequila. And then we talked about Rosa, which is tequila aged in red wine barrels. It has kind of a rose color to it. Then we talked about rum. We talked about the different styles. We have rum industrial, and rum agricole. Rum industrial is from sugarcane molasses, rum agricole is from sugarcane juice. By the way, rum agricole is also spelt rum, R-U-M, but sometimes you'll notice it's spelt R-H-U-M. So if you ever see an H on there, R-H-U-M, you know it's a rum agricole from sugarcane juice. That's like Bobbin Core or Mount Gay or what else is a good, from Rum Clément. There's a bunch of them out there, but it's spelled R-H-U-M. By the way, it can be spelled both ways. So just if it's spelled R-U-M, it could still be rum agricole. It's kind of up to the producer. That's the problem with rum, is that there's so many governments involved. There's no one standardized, strict method on how to make great rum. And so it's kind of left up to the individual producer in that country. And the French are very strict about it. The Brits are pretty strict about it. Everyone else is kind of like, yeah, kind of loosey-goosey, do whatever you want to do. So, what else did we talk about? Brandy, and then we talked about all the different styles of brandy. Brandy is anything made from fruit or vegetables. The best brandies in the world are often made from grapes. Well, that's not true. I take that back. That's just not true. But it's made from fruits and vegetables. But the most famous brandies are made from grapes, and that's Cognac and Armagnac and Brandy de Jerez and Pisco, which we didn't talk too much about. Pisco is from Peru, and it is a Peruvian unaged brandy. It has no color to it because it hasn't been in barrels, but it's just unaged grapes, and they do several different styles like Quiabrante, Acholado, and Mosto Verde. So I'm just nerding out on you now. All right, so now we got all that, and finally we finished up with liqueurs and fortified wines. Fortified aromatized wines like vermouth. We take a wine, we distill a little bit of it, so we make spirit. We add the spirit back to the wine, raising the alcohol above 16%, so all the yeast is killed off. And then we add botanicals to flavor it. And so now we have a flavored wine, fortified flavored wine. And it'll last much longer than a normal wine, but not indefinitely. And eventually it gets skunky. So we should take our dry vermouth and refrigerate it as a general rule. And if we can buy smaller bottles, that's even better. But sweet vermouth has enough sugar in that it keeps it fresh. It'll preserve the wine indefinitely on a sweet vermouth or anything with a lot of sugar in it. And then we talked about liqueurs. Basically, just add a lot of sugar afterwards. And there's really good liqueurs that use really good ingredients, like Grand Marnier and Cointreau. And there's really bad liqueurs, like just green creme de menthe and creme de banana and anything that doesn't have a solid history. Saint Germain, good. Decaille Pure. I don't want to say Decaille Pure is bad, because you never know where your next paycheck is coming from. But I will say this, they do use high fructose corn syrup as a sweetener, and they use artificial colors and artificial flavors. So, bad, but it's up to you. Anyway, the point is, there's a million liqueurs, and that's it. All right, now we're all cut up. Today, we're going to talk about mixology, and we're going to roll out a new cocktail list. Where's John? John? So here's a new cocktail list. Craig asked me to make a list for you guys that was an Italian theme. So I added on some cocktails without meeting you guys and seeing what's going on here. I added a bunch of different cocktails that I thought would play well. And we're going to taste them all. And if we all agree it tastes delicious, we're going to keep it. And if we all agree it's like, yeah, then we'll get rid of it. But I'm pretty sure you're going to like a lot of them, if not all of them. And after eating here last night and getting a chance to meet you guys and look at your guests, I added a different cocktail on. We're going to do a bacon fat-washed old fashioned. We're going to infuse bourbon with thick-cut applewood smoked bacon and the bacon grease and let it sit overnight. The ethanol, which is a solvent, is going to strip out all that flavor in the fat. The fat's going to rise in the top. We'll put it in the refrigerator overnight. It's going to rise to the top. We're going to skim the fat off and then filter it and put it through a coffee filter. So now we're just back to clear old bourbon. And when you drink that old-fashioned, we'll put a little bit of sugar in there and stir it down with a lemon twist. You take a sip and you're like, bourbon, what's the big deal? It's just bourbon. Boom, hits you on the backside. You're like, bacon. And it tastes awesome because everything tastes better with bacon, right? So we're going to make a bacon old-fashioned, and we may even do, I haven't decided on this yet, but we may do some pickled quail eggs or even a half a deviled egg or something like that. We'll do it the bacon and eggs cocktail. You guys will be famous in this part of the country, in this part of Mississippi, for your bacon and eggs cocktail. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about mixology, cover garnish theory, and I'm going to make you guys some cocktails. But we want to go over your bar tools real fast. And you'd be surprised, a lot of bartenders, even really experienced bartenders, who've been working with these tools for years, they don't know all the functions of them, and they don't know the names of them. So let's start off with this. What is this? A shaker. It's a Boston shaker. That is correct. And in fact, traditionally, the Boston shaker, here, it's usually a metal tin and a pint glass. This is a pint glass for beer, but that's fine. They go together like that. I actually like the Boston glass because I can see my proportions. But I also, you see a lot of the higher end mixology establishments use this, which is called a cheater tin. It's not really cheating, but it's called a cheater tin. And the reason is because we can then take, especially if you're really busy, you can take multiple things, me shaking them down. When we're done here, you guys are gonna have the best guns in town. I'm gonna work on, your arms are gonna hurt, but you're gonna be like, ah, man, feel the burn, right? So that's the Boston tin, the cheater tin, the Boston glass, and the Boston tin. Boston tin, Boston glass, cheater tin. And together, whichever combination you use, they're called a Boston shaker. There's another type of shaker that's in common use in the United States, mostly for home use, which is called the cobbler shaker. It looks like the Boston tin, then it has a lid on the top with the strainer in it, and a cap that goes on that. It's 3 pieces. That's a cobbler shaker. Professionals hate those because those little caps always get lost in the dishwasher and we can't find them. So what do? We just keep the cap permanently on the lid, and that way we never have to worry about losing them. The problem with that is that cap serves a purpose. If I keep the cap on the lid and then put that on top of here, I have maximum surface area. I'm compressing all that air in there. So when I go to shake it, it starts leaking down the side of the tin. So what we're supposed to do is put the lid on and then put the cap on, and you can shake it down. But we don't have to worry about that because we don't have them. If you have them at home, just FYI, now you know how to use them. Don't just put the cap on. Don't put the lid on with the cap at the same time. There's a third type of shaker out there called a Parisian shaker. We don't see it very much in the United States, but they use it all throughout Europe. And if you ever see one, you're like, oh, Brian told me about that. It looks like a Boston tin like this, and it has one lid. The lid has no strainer or anything like that. But instead of going on the outside like a cobbler shaker, it actually fits just on the inside. So you stick it in there like that, and it has no strainer on top. You just shake it down, separate it, and then you put your strainer and go like that. So that's called a Parisian shaker and is very popular in Europe. So what is this called?
Strainer.
A strainer. Thank you very kindly. Now what is this called? A julep strainer. Okay, so what is this called?
Fine strainer.
Okay, so we got a fine strainer, a julep strainer, and a strainer. This has a name. Anybody know what that name is? This is called a Hawthorne strainer. No worries, no worries. The Hawthorne strainer is the one with the coils in it. And that coil comes off. We know that. Why do we come off? One, so we can clean it. Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes we get mint and other stuff stuck in there and seeds, so we clean that off. But also, if we're doing egg white cocktails, and have you guys have any egg white cocktails? You do egg white cocktails, we can throw that coil into our tin and do a dry shake without any ice, and we can whip those egg whites into a nice tight meringue and get a nice tight foam, a crema on top, which is just lovely. And so we'll practice that a little later on and talk about how to make a great crema. So the Hawthorne strainer. Now the Hawthorne strainer, we also have this. What is this called?
Mixing glass.
A mixing glass. Yes, and we have a mixing glass, and we also have the Boston glass. The mixing glass is used for certain cocktails. So when do we shake a cocktail, and when do we strain a cocktail? So if somebody orders a cocktail, How do I determine whether that cocktail is shaken or stirred? I'm going to give you the rule. The rule is, if every ingredient in the cocktail has an alcoholic component, we always stir the cocktail. If there is a non-alcoholic component to the cocktail, we always shake the cocktail. It's all right. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. So why do we do that? Why, if it's all alcohol, why do we stir it and why do we shake it? I want to let you guys know the reasons why, so that it makes sense to you, so that in the future when you're making these cocktails, you're saying, oh yeah, it makes, if you come and say, should I shake or stir this? Well, the reason why is this. Oh, you're supposed to shake it or you're supposed to stir it. You'll know the reason why. Why do we stir a cocktail if it's all alcohol? Okay, here's the answer.
More ice to dilute it with. It's just ice in there.
Good guess, but I want to be more specific. So here's the answer to your question. Any great spirit, whether it's a vodka or a gin or a tequila or a rum, every great spirit that's well made has natural oils. And we want to keep those oils intact. It's very creamy, very viscous. Think about when you put that vodka bottle in the freezer, how it gets nice and creamy and thick and viscous. We want those oils intact because when we swallow that cocktail, it coats the back third of our tongue. And when we exhale, as the air passes out of our lungs and over the back third of our tongue, we're tasting all that flavor, all those oils. So we want to stir that cocktail down. If we shake it, to your point earlier, we're adding bubbles. We're aerating it, we're forcing micro bubbles throughout, and we're significantly compromising the integrity of those oils. They say you're like bruising the gin. Well, that's what that means. You're aerating it. You're forcing bubbles throughout, and then you have this, you don't get all that flavor. So if there's a non-alcoholic component, like water or milk or lemon juice or lime juice or any kind of non-alcoholic ingredient, it's going to sufficiently break apart those oil molecules so that you don't have that creaminess. We might as well shake it down, get it nice and cold, get that little froth on top and those little ice chips, which we want to strain out. We want to get it down to the proper rate of dilution and have a nice, cold, chilled, delicious cocktail. Okay? Despite what James Bond says, we should always stir. Do you ask your guests if they want their martini shaken or stirred? You might have yesterday, but moving forward, the answer is no. You shouldn't ask them because people who know are going to look at you cockeyed like, boy, they really don't know what they're talking about or what they're doing. A good martini should always be stirred. And if the guest wants it shaken, they'll tell you, can you shake that for me or can I make that shaken? And you're like, absolutely, no problem. You might even get a guest who's like, don't you know it's supposed to be shaken? And you sit there and you say, well, Brian Van Flandern, no, don't do that. You sit there and say, absolutely, no problem, my pleasure. The guest is always right. We've got to just eliminate our ego there and say, hey, no problem, whatever you want. I'm happy to do it your way. But the guest is always right, so no problem. Just 2 days ago, right before I came here, it was my father-in-law's birthday. I actually had an 8 p.m. dinner and caught an 11:45 flight overnight to come here. And while we were there, we went to the steakhouse in Las Vegas, and I asked for I actually said to the waitress, I said, do you shake or stir your martinis? Just because sometimes they shake them. And she goes, oh, sir, we always stir. And I was going, oh, of course you do. Thank you. I just had to ask. Can I get a nice Manhattan, please? They didn't know who I was, and I wasn't trying to be pretentious. So I was like, I just like a nice stirred Manhattan. She's like, absolutely, no problem. So she sits there, and she brings me this in a little shaker there, and she sets down my beautiful martini, and she goes, here you go, sir. She did a big show of it. I was going, ah. She just aerated my martini. She just put bubbles all throughout it. And I was like going, thank you. I didn't say anything. My wife's kicking me under the table. Don't you say it. Don't you say it. I was like, I'm not going to drink my martini. Sad. Sad face. So we want to keep those, when we're straining a martini that's stirred, we want to keep it low and try to avoid getting bubbles in there. I mean, 1 or 2 is not a big deal, but we're talking about, you just don't want to aerate it. So, in that vein, the Hawthorne strainer is used with the Boston tin. We always strain a Boston tin with a Hawthorne strainer. And we always use the fine strainer to strain out those ice chips. Now, some people love those little ice chips in their drink. And the reason they love those ice chips is because that cocktail wasn't properly diluted or properly shaken down. And those ice chips continue to melt and continue to dilute that cocktail. But if we're professionals and we're making a great, consistently perfect cocktail every time, then leaving those ice chips in there, it will continue to further melt and further dilute, and pretty soon you're going to have a watered down cocktail, which tastes watery and thin. So we're going to get those ice chips out of there. The only time we single strain with a Boston shaker and Hawthorne strainer is if the cocktail has egg whites in it or cream. And the reason is because if you double strain with egg whites or cream, the fine strainer is going to catch and hold most of those egg whites and some of that cream, and it defeats the purpose of that beautiful frothy crema on top. Otherwise, we always double strain. Make sense? The julep strainer is used exclusively for the mixing glass. We never, ever, ever use a Hawthorne strainer in a mixing glass. It's the julep strainer. And the julep strainer, as you notice, is 2 pieces. You have the bowl with the holes in it. And then you have this spot welded handle, which is spot welded to the back of the bowl. And if you set it inside the mixing glass, the joint comes right up to the edge there, to the point where if I take my finger, I can just push down on it and it can't come out. You see it's upside down. Sometimes you'll see bartenders doing it this way. That's the incorrect way. You want to do it this way, right at the joint there. That should be washed. But it gets in there, and now I can hold it like this and keep it low and oily. Okay? What are these called?
Jigger.
Of course. And I got you guys some Japanese jiggers, or requested them. I don't know which ones you're using. These Japanese jiggers are really accurate and they're really beautiful. The only thing is, you got to make sure you know your proportions. This is 1 ounce, this is 1.5 ounces, this is 1 ounce and 2 ounces. So they look identical, except this one is a little bit larger. So make sure that you understand the proportions. You know, ideally you have 2 jiggers behind your bar per well or per what station. Ideally, I mean, it is going to be what it's going to be, but just make sure you know your proportions. This is a 1/2 ounce, and there's a line at the midpoint, which is obviously 1/4 ounce. This is 3/4 ounce. This is 1 ounce. Inside of there is 3/4 ounce. In the middle is a 1/2 ounce. Over here is 1.5 ounces. So if somebody asks me for 1 ounce and a quarter, there's 1 ounce, and I can do a 1/4 ounce there. Just ounce, 1.25 ounces, dump it in, and go. So pretty simple math, but helps to know your stuff. Bar tools, bar spoons. These are teardrop spoons. I like these personally because they're weighted. So the idea is that once they're balanced, you can go ahead and stir that. How do you stir a drink? The idea is that the back of the spoon, the bowl of the spoon there, is always touching the back of the glass. And for that reason, I'm going to use this particular one. It's a weighted bar spoon with a skull on the top. Not only does it look cool, but you can actually crack ice with it. But it's a weighted bar spoon, and the reason I like to use this when I'm showing how to stir a cocktail is because the beginning mistake that a lot of bartenders do is look at the skull right now. You see the head of the skull? A lot of bartenders do this, and they just try to stir it around. They grip onto the handle and they turn it around and around. The idea is the back of the spoon conforms to the back of the glass. At all times, you're constantly pushing the back of the spoon to the back of the glass. Back of the spoon to the back of the glass. So now look at the skull. You can see that the handle's actually twisting in my hand. And once you get your speed up, You can chill that down just almost as fast as shaking a cocktail. And you get the proper rate of dilution. You're going to bring those oils down, and a great Manhattan, you should bring it down to about 22% alcohol by volume. So it's not so strong. I'll make you a cocktail today. I'll make 2 identical cocktails. I'll make 2 Manhattans for you, and you tell me which one tastes better to you. 1 shaken, and I'm going to be a lazy bartender, and then 1 properly balanced, and you tell me which one tastes better. And we're at the exact same proportions, identical cocktails. How do you separate a Boston 10? First of all, what is this called? Do you ever scoop with the Boston tin? Do you ever scoop your Moscow mules with the cup?
Yep. Red flag. Find out.
We did yesterday. We're no longer doing that today because moving forward, we have the right tool for the right job. And so yesterday that was acceptable. Today I'm suggesting I want you guys to be the best. So let's all do it the right way. And the answer is, starting today, there's a fine line. Starting today, there's a difference starting after those 2 drinks. There's a difference between cutting corners and being efficient. Cutting corners is, guess is right here. I got my tin. There's the ice. What's the big deal? That's just, cutting corners is consolidating steps behind your bar in order to make your job and your life just a little bit easier. Being efficient is consolidating steps behind your bar in order to make the guest experience a better one. So if I go to scoop the ice, and where's the ice scoop? Oh shoot, they took it back in the kitchen, it's in the dishwasher. Where's my ice scoop? The guest is suffering. I'll go ahead and use that. I hate to do it. As soon as I'm done with this cocktail, I'm going to hunt down that ice scoop. But that's being efficient. Same thing. See the difference? One is about the guest and their experience, and the other one's just about, making your life a little easier. And the only question you got to ask yourself is, you're here from 9 to 5 anyhow, or whatever your hours are. Every day you come in the morning, you leave in the evening. The only question is, what are you going to do with that time in between? And I say this to you guys because, people lecture at you all the time. It's when, I never got into this game because I wanted to be a professional bartender. That was not my true passion. I went to New York to be an actor. I went to the National Shakespeare Conservatory. Okay? And I had some success. I was pretty good at it. But here's the thing. It wasn't until I decided, well, as long as I'm going to be bartending, and I started working for this famous chef, Thomas Keller. I told you about that restaurant. I was like, wow, I really like this job and I'm learning a lot. But if I'm gonna keep my job, I need to up my game. And that's what motivated me at the time. But over time, as I started doing it more and more, I was like, you know what? When I started committing myself to being the best bartender I could be, that was when my life transformed. That's when I started getting raises, I started getting promotions, people started treating me different. It's like, be the best. Who here has ever had bacon and eggs for breakfast? Bacon and eggs. Look, the chicken was involved in the making of your breakfast. It laid the egg. But the pig was committed, right? So I throw it down to you guys. Be the bacon. Commit and be, I said this yesterday, I don't care if you're a single dad, a single mom, I don't care if you're going to school and just paying the student loans while you're working on your degree in marine biology. I don't care if you are writing the great American novel or you're a producer, whatever your jam is. While you're bartending, while you're waiting tables, while you're working in this restaurant, be the set your own standard. Obviously the chef has a high standard. That's his level. You rise above that, it's very rare you'll fall below his standards. And they automatically come to you and say, I can trust that employee. They're always looking out. They're always trying to take the next step. And also, when you do screw up, and we all screw up, they're not going to come down on you like a ton of bricks, because they'll be like, you know what? You made a mistake, but you're there for me 90% of the time, 95% of the time, so just be the bacon. Be the bacon. Okay, sorry, I'm done preaching. Whoop, soapbox. Sorry, I didn't see that there. Getting off the soapbox. But be the best. And I'll tell you right now, when you commit to doing the bartending job the best, don't be surprised if all of a sudden people start treating you differently, and that includes in your interpersonal relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, with your family. It also helps when somebody in your family dies or something like that, something dramatic, because you start accepting change as it comes at you instead of resisting it and being a bundle of stress at the end of the night. It actually is much more healthy. Getting back to my original point, we're here from 9 to 5. What are you going to do with that time? You got to be here. Is the idea to go ahead and take care of all my guests? Everybody's taken care of? Cool. Or is it, okay, everybody's taken care of, you're good, you're good? All right. Hey man, Fernet Branca, what the heck is this stuff anyhow? Take a look at the bottle, read it, learn something new. Or if you really want to get in good graces with John, pick up a bar towel and start, got time to lean, got time to clean, right? That kind of thing. By the way, Trey is your friend. Michelin 3-star, you're allowed to clear a single glass off the table without a tray. But if somebody says, oh, can you take mine as well? You're like, absolutely, you can give me just a quick second. You run, you grab a tray, and you take anything else that needs to be taken. But when you come to a table, you should always have a tray. Always. Tray is your friend. I saw the sign back there, but honestly, you should always have a tray handy and near you at all times. And you all know that saying, all hands in, all hands out. You should never go into the kitchen without something in your hand. And should never go out of the kitchen without something in your hand. And if you can't find something to put in your kitchen, in your hand on the way out or on the way in, grab a tray. Grab a tray. That way it gets into your body that you should always have a tray on your person. Sorry, just throwing that out there. Okay, what are these? Garnish tongs. We call them tweezers, is fine, but they're garnish tongs is the name of them. And we use these for olives, onions, and anything else. We shouldn't really touch anything that goes into the liquid of. Sometimes when it comes to mint, I'll spank it and then I'll insert it that way. But generally, at the stem end, but the leaves are on the outside of the drink. But anything that I'm touching with my hands, I really don't want inside the drink. I'll perch it on the side and the guest can pick it up and squeeze it. But things like cherries, I mean, if you're having a Manhattan and somebody reaches in with their fingers and stabs your cherry and puts it in your drink, isn't there a little part of you is like going, I hope he washed his hands? Is there? No? That's what goes through my mind. And I would just suggest that that's what a lot of your guests are thinking as well. So we use these, and they're much easier to use than chopsticks because they're attached. So you don't have to learn how to use. All you have to do is grab them, and you can actually, if you're doing a spiral lemon twist, you grab one in here and one in here, and you can twist over the drink. Very easy. That's it. A muddle stick. Muddling. A lot of them are plastic and metal. That's fine. This one is wood. It's a hard wood like cherry wood, which is antimicrobial, and it's hard to get it in there. But still, even when I use my wooden muddle stick, I immediately wash it after use. I don't have to spend time scrubbing it and everything like that. We're too busy. We got a whole bar full of people. Fine. But all I have to do is I muddle, finish, go like this, shake it off, and set it to the side. You ever been in a bar that had those little short ones, little ones that when you try to muddle, you cut your hand on the side of the tin because it doesn't go in far enough. It only goes in just about that high. You know what I'm talking about? The little short ones. And sometimes they have the brown shellac finish on them. You guys know what I'm talking about? I don't even know if they make them like that anymore, but they were popular when I was growing up. If you ever notice, it has this nice brown shellac finish, but the tip is always white. Why is that? Like white wood. The shellac came off. from the muddling and from the crushing and from the citrus, from the acid of the limes and sugars and what else. Where did that shellac go to? Went in somebody's drink. Disgusting. But here's the worst part. Have you ever seen that little small muddler or wooden muddler stick like this? And it's shellacked up here, and down the tip is black? What does that mean? That is black mold. That means somebody muddled their sugar or whatever, and they didn't even rinse it off. They just set it back in the container or whatever it is at the end of the night, and that grew bacteria and mold. And every time you're muddling that next cocktail, that black mold is getting in your cocktail. Yuck. Gross. Paring knife. I just want to mention knife etiquette, knife rules. So I don't know if you know the parts of your knife or not. You got the tip, the blade, you got the bolster is here, you got the tang and the handle. The bolster is that part right there. And when you're handling a knife behind the bar, I'd like you guys to have better knives. I hate those serrated knives that you use for sawing bread and sawing and hacking at lime and lemon wedges, because it just kind of makes all the rough edges. It's just like crack, especially if it's dull. This should be sharpened, but what we do is we put our finger right up against the bolster and put our thumb on the back side there, and now we have maximum control. When you're cutting lemons and limes or whatever you're cutting on a board, especially behind the bar when your hands are wet all the time, you always do what a chef does. It's called the claw, and we just actually roll your fingers in, and that way it's very, very difficult to cut yourself. The worst, and you can cut right like this, right up against the knuckle, and you're not likely to cut yourself. And if you do, you might get a little nick or a little cut on your finger, but you're not chopping off the tip of your finger, which is what we want to avoid, right? Other quick knife etiquette. Obviously, if I'm going to hand somebody a knife, I grab it by the bolster and I hand it to them this way with the knife, the blade out. That way they can grab the handle. And most importantly, when walking behind the bar, your finger's always on the bolster and the tip is pointed straight to the ground. Get in the habit of doing that, especially when you think you're the only one behind the bar. Especially, because when you know someone's behind the bar, you automatically do it because it's just in your mind. But especially when you think you're the only one behind the bar, put it down like this, because otherwise you're like going, hey, did you see that game? Oh man, my fantasy team is killing it right now, thanks. Thunk. And John just came behind there to grab something. Now maybe you're okay with stabbing John, but let's just say JD comes back there and you got a coup, and now he walks right into your knife, and that's because you were just, so always down, always with the blade towards the back. So when I walk over, I say, oh shoot, I forgot you need cherries, I'll be right back. And I'm just running over here, got it, run back here, and it's always down this way, and then I can put it up or set it down. Knife etiquette. All right, that's it. Citrus press, a hand squeezer. These are called knuckle breakers because they, ouch, they hit your knuckles every time. But we also got this, that big citrus press for you guys, so you can squeeze it much faster, much easier. Fresh lime juice is the key. All right, that's it. That's our bar tools. So let's talk about cocktails. The key to making a great cocktail. This is very easy. This is the secret to my success. Why I get to travel the world and do what I do. It's because I learned this little formula. It's very, very easy. The key to making a great cocktail is three things. One, quality spirits. Now, yesterday we talked about spirits. So we talked about quality doesn't have to mean expensive. Tito's, we argued, is better than Grey Goose, or at least as good, and it's cheap. So quality spirits, pot distilled or column distilled, but high quality. Number two, fresh ingredients. That sounds obvious, sounds pretty, people are like, yeah, I get it, fresh ingredients. We all heard that before. Fresh makes all the difference. Huge difference. We're gonna use fresh squeezed lime juice, fresh squeezed lemon. If you not sure, I'll see if I can get you guys some Dole canned pineapple juice and see if we can squeeze down some fresh pineapple juice. And you chase them side by side, cheese and chalk. Two very different things. They just taste so much better fresh. Last key is balance. And this is the thing that is rarely taught, and this is the thing that you guys are going to be working on over the next 2 days a lot, which is balance. The balance is three things. So under the word balance, you're going to write these three words: acid, sugar, and alcohol. We're balancing the acid, sugar, and alcohol. Now, sugar is a flavor enhancer. So if you wanted to take that same triangle and do a reverse mirror of it, it would be acid, salt, and alcohol. If it was a savory cocktail, we would say salt is the opposite of sugar because they're both flavor enhancers. But either way, acid, sugar, and alcohol. We're balancing those three things. So for the rest of your life, every time you make a cocktail, you want to identify what is your acid, what is your sugar, and what component is your alcohol. So let's talk about some sugars. Somebody name me a sugar.
Cane.
Cane sugar.
Like starch.
So starches, when they break down, those starch granules unravel, they become glucose, which is a sugar. Sugar, okay, that's fair enough. Just think of something sweet.
Like anything, I can do like syrup.
Syrup. What, like simple syrup?
Yes.
Okay, simple syrup.
Fruit.
Ripe fruit. Underripe blueberries, underripe strawberries, underripe bananas are acidic. Ripe bananas, ripe strawberries, ripe bananas have a lot of sugar in them. Absolutely. Fruit and fruit juices as well. Actually, I was like, oh, that's what I was going to say. Keep on going, man. What's that? Demerara sugar. Sorry, it's a southern thing. That's cool. Demerara. Demerara sugar, yes, which is that caramelized brown sugar, almost like sugar in the raw, which is another kind of sugar. But yes, Demerara. I'm coming at you guys. I'm coming at you like, oh no. Okay, go ahead.
Like agave nectar.
Agave nectar, absolutely agave nectar, of course. Twice as sweet as sugar, lower glycemic index than sugar, so you metabolize it faster. It's a healthier sugar for you. And of course, what's agave nectar going to pair really well with?
Tequila.
And mezcal. Of course it is, because it's made from the same plant. Absolutely. What else?
Lemon oleo, but it's infused with lemon pits. So what would you do?
Yeah, so there's some acidity in there. There's some acidity in there as well. But what's the sugar source in lemon oleo?
Simple syrup, basically.
So basically, we got back to simple syrup. Gotcha. What else? All right, no problem. Like what? Splenda, sure. Splenda's a sugar. What else? It's sweet, isn't it? Stevia, equal, sweet and low. That's that saccharin in it, right? Glucose, fructose, sucrose. They're all sugars. What else you got?
Honey.
Honey! How did we forget honey?
Molasses.
Molasses. Oh, high five. That's awesome. Molasses is a great sugar. Thinking about it now? What do you put on your pancakes in the morning? Maple syrup. Absolutely. Yeah, he totally stole your... I was trying to throw you a softball. He's like, yeah. Whoosh. So guys, there are literally a million sugars to play with out there. Not to mention, none of you mentioned all of your liqueurs. All of these liquors back there, they have alcohol and sugar in them. Right? There's a million sugars to play with. I just opened up a whole rainbow of flavors for you to work with. What about acids? Name me an acid. We're going this way. You guys, be prepared. I'm coming your way. Give me an acid to work with. Lemon juice. Lime juice. Orange juice. You guys are taking the easy ones. You guys are going to have to think down here. But here's the thing. Orange juice and pineapple juice, which somebody else can use, those juices have so much residual sugars in them, we may have to add additional acidity to balance out our cocktail. So oranges are definitely acidic, but they're also so sweet, we may have to add some additional acidity. Make sense? What else you got? Pineapple juice. And by the way, pineapple juice, the enzymes in pineapple actually break down human tissue. I don't know if you know this, but when you are eating a pineapple, it is literally eating you. It's the only fruit in the world. When you're eating it, it's eating you too. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love pineapple juice, but, you know. What you got for me? Say what? Tonic water? Tonic water is acidic. They often add sugar to it. Depends. If you're using Schweppes tonic water, they're adding copious amounts of high fructose corn syrup. But you're right that the quinine is very acidic. So the combination is just a question of whether it's sweet or not. If it says Indian tonic water on it, Indian tonic water means they're using cane sugar syrup instead of high fructose corn syrup. That's what Indian tonic water is, in case you ever wondered. Because in India, they just use cane sugar to make their tonic with the bark from the fever tree, right? Good, good, good. What you got?
Maybe like blood orange juice or like...
Orange juice? Blood orange juice, yeah. Navel orange juice? It's an orange juice, but yes, it's absolutely, and by the way, blood orange juice is more acidic than navel oranges. It's not as sweet, but it looks cool as hell, right? It looks like blood orange. I love it. Okay, what you got? Grapefruit, nobody said grapefruit. Yes, grapefruits and pomelos, what you got?
Dairy. Black dairy.
Yeah, dairy. So half and half, and milk. There are some sugars that break down in there, but it's very acidic. It is definitely acidic. What you got?
Citric acid.
Citric acid. Now we're thinking like a mixologist. We're thinking outside of just the common citrus, which is all good. Lime, and those are the staples of every bartender, so absolutely need to get those out there. But now we're thinking outside of the box. There are literally a million acids to play with.
I got no clue.
It's okay, we stumped them down here, now we're on the other side of the rainbow. Sorry, guys.
Tomato juice.
What about like cider?
Tomato juice.
Tomato, yeah, that's a good one. Tomato juice.
Hey, good job, tomato juice.
You don't want to show.
No, okay. What you got for me?
What about like non-alcoholic ciders?
Ginger beer.
Ginger beer, sure. Well, there's a lot of sugar in there, but it is acidic. Non-alcoholic cider, sure. Non-alcoholic cider can be, depends. Some of them are really sweet and some of them aren't. So the answer is yes. By the way, what about chipotle chili powder? What about balsamic vinegar? What about emergency vitamin C crystals? What about love? No. What about there's a million different acids out there. We can play with these acids and throw them in and work with them. Anything acidic, underripe blueberries, underripe strawberries, underripe fruits, underripe vegetables are acidic. And we add them and we have to balance it out with the sugar. And then of course the last component is alcohol. And of course we have a million alcohols to work with, but some of those alcohols have sugars in them. So when we're balancing it out, we have to factor in that it's not only alcoholic, it's also sweet. And we have to provide additional acidity to balance that out. So for the next of your life, every time you make a cocktail, you need to identify what's the acid, alcohol, and sugar in your cocktail. Okay? If I make a margarita made from tequila, Cointreau, and fresh lime juice, just those three ingredients, what is my acid? Fresh lime juice. What's my sugar? The Cointreau. What's my alcohol? And Cointreau. Tequila and Cointreau. Because Cointreau is 40%. It's the same amount of alcohol as the tequila. So we need to balance that out. So for the rest of your life, you follow the cocktail and you follow the recipe, and then we have to balance it. And since this is a sports town, I'm going to use a baseball analogy. When we balance the cocktail, we want to get it into the flavor zone, which I want you to think of as a strike zone in baseball. I'm throwing that pitch, I followed the recipe, I threw the pitch, and it hopefully lands somewhere in the flavor zone. But if I hit outside of the flavor zone, it's either too tart, meaning it's too acidic, it's too sweet, meaning it has too much sugar, it's too strong, meaning it has too much alcohol, or too weak, meaning it's too thin, it doesn't have enough alcohol. That's the flavor zone. And the reason we can't just follow a recipe on the page is because there are too many X factors we can't control. Think of it like this, a chef. What chef makes a soup, follows the recipe exactly as it's written, and then kicks it out into the kitchen, into the dining room without first tasting it to make sure that it's spot on? So it needs a little more salt, it needs a little bit more, a pinch of oregano, it needs a little bit of this, it needs a little of that. Any decent chef is going to taste that soup before they send it out. Why? Why don't they just follow the recipe?
Because ingredients can always be different. Like if you have oregano, it may not be as strong as the last batch of oregano you've had.
That's one example, but dead on. That's absolutely true. Anybody else? Say what?
Could be missing something.
Well, yeah, it maybe you forgot to put something in. That happens sometimes. Bartenders have done that. You're like, here you go, here's your Cosmo, and it's clear, and you're going, wait, oh, I forgot the cranberry juice. Oh, poop. Sure. Maybe that's another good reason. Anything else?
Could be like mislabeled.
Could be mislabeled, absolutely. There's a million reasons why, but there's also, when it comes to making a cocktail, there are too many X factors that you can't control. Let's just say our simple syrup. Let's say I made the simple syrup today, and tomorrow JD makes a simple syrup. Only he eyeballed it. We both do a 1-to-1 simple syrup, 50% sugar, 50% water. He eyeballed it, and he ended up adding a 1/4 gram more sugar than I did. Well, the sweetness, the Brix levels on his simple syrup is going to be sweeter than mine. If I say shake that cocktail 10 times, and you go, okay, no problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10. And then I give it to JD, and JD's like, no problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are two completely different rates of dilution. So I can't tell you to shake it 10 times because I don't know how hard you shake it. By the way, what kind of ice are you using? What's the size of your ice? How, you know that hotel ice that's hollow on the inside? That's going to melt down in 2 seconds flat. We want those big ice cubes that are 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 inch for shaking cocktails. This is acceptable, but is not ideal for cocktails, for great cocktails. It's acceptable, and that's why I'm not advocating for a new ice machine for you guys. But then we want to strain it over a bigger cube or a sphere so that it melts really slow. The larger the ice, the less surface area is coming in contact with a liquid, and the slower the rate of dilution. Ergo, we prefer big ice in cocktails. Nevertheless, lime juice, lemon juice, orange juice, the Italians say that, and this is an Italian restaurant, citrus is golden in the morning, silver in the afternoon, and bronze in the evening. What does that mean? Throughout the course of the day, your fresh juices are going to slowly start to oxidize. Oxygen is the enemy of all living things, including humans. You need it to survive. Without it, we all die. But the funny thing is, it's what turns metal into rust. It's what turns, turns fruit into sludge, into rotting, everything decomposes and rots because of oxygen. And the minute we cut into our fresh lime juice, the clock starts ticking on that fresh lime juice. Eventually it's going to become oxidized, and it's going to become skunky and bitter, and become just unacceptable. And 24 hours later, we should be squeezing fresh limes again. The point is, throughout the course of the shift, your lime juice is going to change from sweet and limey to limey and less sweet. And we may have to add additional sugar to balance out that lime juice. My point is that there's too many X factors that you cannot control, so you need to taste every single cocktail that you make. We're not drinking on the job. We're professionals. We taste it. You take a straw, you put it in there, put your finger over the top, you step aside, and put a drop on your tongue. If through the course of the shift, you consume more than a 1/4 ounce of liquid, you're not doing it right. You're just getting a drop on your tongue. And the idea is you take the drop on your tongue and you ask yourself, is it too strong? Is it too sweet? Is it too tart? Is it too weak? Acid, sugar, and alcohol. Then you just adjust in 1/4 ounce increments in the right direction, and you try to bring it into the flavor zone. Your cocktails don't have to taste identical, they just have to taste delicious inside the flavor zone. Make sense? It's not complicated. This isn't rocket science, but nobody ever explained it to you that way before? Now it makes sense. Acid, sugar, and alcohol. Now when we build our cocktail, let's say I'm doing a gin and tonic, and I have my mixing tin or my glass. What's the first thing I'm going to add to my tin and glass? What's that?
Ice.
So traditionally, when I was growing up, gin. The first thing we would always add would be the ice. But the second we add the ice, the clock starts ticking. Things are melting. All of a sudden, Mr. Green falls off his bar stool, or the chef's like, food in the kitchen, get in here. Or John's like, hey, I need your help out front. Whatever's going down, I got to stop what I'm doing and set that down, run away and come back. By the time I come back 3 minutes later, 4 minutes later, that's a watered down mess. So maybe, just maybe, we should be adding our ice last. Maybe that's the way you guys have been doing it all along. I don't know. There was a mixologist involved here before, so maybe that you've all been trained that way. But just want to make sure we understand when you add the ice last. When we're building our cocktail, we always build from, you might want to write this down, from the mixer to the modifier to the base spirit. Mixer, modifier, base spirit, then ice, and then carbonation. That's the rule. That's the chain. Mixer, modifier, base spirit, ice, and carbonation. What is a mixer? Who can tell me what a mixer is?
A mixer in that case would be like tonics, right?
Yeah.
So here's the answer to your question. A mixer we're going to define as any non-carbonated, non-alcoholic ingredient. It's a non-alcoholic ingredient without carbonation. Okay? It's a mixer. Anything that's non-alcoholic. And that includes milk, water, lime juice, grapefruit juice, orange juice, lemon juice. There's a million mixers out there. Anything non-alcoholic and non-carbonated. The modifier. What's the modifying spirit? In our example of our margarita, we have tequila, we have lime juice, and we have Cointreau. What's our mixer? Lime juice. What's our modifier? Why?
Because it has alcohol.
Balances the alcohol. To
Sugar
wine.
and alcohol.
Yes, but that has nothing to do with the sugar. The modifying spirit is the alcoholic spirit that is in lesser proportion and modifies the flavor of the base spirit. Remember yesterday we talked about the major 6 base spirits? What are the 6 major base spirits? Vodka, gin, tequila, gin, rum, whiskey, and brandy. Right? But if I make a Campari and soda, what's my base spirit? Campari. It's Campari. There's a million base spirits, but my point is the modifier alters the flavor of the base spirit in its lower proportions. Because tequila and Cointreau are both 40% alcohol by volume. Why don't I say that Cointreau is my base spirit? I'm using a lot less of it. So it's my modifying spirit. And tequila is my base spirit. And the base spirit is defined as the spirit that dominates the alcohol by volume in the cocktail. For example, if I made a proper classic Negroni cocktail, which is made with equal parts of gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth, what's my mixer?
Just the lesser alcohol content.
You don't have a
I don't have a mixer. There is no non-alcoholic component in that cocktail. So there is no mixer. What's my modifier? Campari and sweet vermouth. Why is the gin the base spirit even though it's in equal proportions?
higher content.
Gin is usually 43 to 49% alcohol by volume. Sweet vermouth is 15 to 20%. Campari is 25% or something like that. I don't even know what is Campari, 15 to 25%. So the base spirit, it's the spirit that dominates the alcohol by volume. Why do we build it that way? Mixer modified. Why do we build it that way? Anybody know?
So if you mess it up, you don't waste like good alcohol.
Zinga, bazinga. You're actually building from the least expensive to the most expensive ingredient. But what I don't want you doing is going, which costs more, lime juice or simple syrup? I don't want you stressed out about that. You just take all your non-alcoholic ingredients in there, you put on all your modifying ingredients in smaller proportions, and you put in your base spirit, the most expensive part of that cocktail, in the end. And if you make a mistake along the way, oh crud, toss it out and start over again, and I haven't wasted all that product. And then once I've got my cocktail built, then I'm going to add my ice. And finally, I'm going to shake it down, and then I'm going to add my carbonation and tumble roll one time to mix it all throughout. You don't just put a float on top and send it out. Listen, I want to let you know we're learning here today. Yesterday was yesterday, so forgive me if it sounds like I'm picking on you. I'm not. Every bartender that I know who doesn't have this training does exactly what you did. So I just want to use you as an example. Is that okay? For sure. Okay, so he made these two Moscow mules, and he floated a little ginger beer on top. Every bartender does it that way. But if I pick up that thing and drink off of it, I get a mouthful of ginger beer. And if I put my straw in there and sip on it, I'm getting vodka and lime juice, but I'm getting none of that ginger beer. And so as I drink throughout, it eventually catches up. It doesn't take much more than a second to take that glass, dump it into a shaker, and then pour it right back in the glass. And now everything's mixed throughout, and the last sip should taste almost identical to the first sip. Make sense? Yes, no? Yes. Yeah, makes sense. So we built from our mixer to the modifier to base spirit, we add our ice, then we add our carbonation if it requires carbonation, and we tumble roll back and forth one time and we serve. I love questions, because if you had any questions.
So can you do the same thing with the bar spoon? If you're in a pinch, like not a pinch, but necessarily, say you got 15 to knock out.
Yeah.
You just like bar spoon it, try to do the same thing. Can you do that?
Well, how do you mean bar spoon?
So like same way you stir a cocktail, you're kind of stirring the ingredients. So if you don't want to float the ginger beer on top, you kind of stir it to incorporate the ginger beer.
Oh yeah.
Into the cocktail. Is that the same thing?
Yes, you can use a bar spoon to mix it. In fact, when I make a Bellini, I put in the puree at the bottom, and then I'll fill it with champagne, and it starts to foam, and I'll let it settle. But once I've got it to the proper pour level, now I can dump it out and dump it back in, but then the sides start to look kind of wonky because I've got that puree. It's better to take a bar spoon, lift, and you're just pulling from the bottom. You're lifting up and pulling, and then send it right out. That's absolutely acceptable. Yeah. That's being efficient as opposed to cutting a corner. Do you understand? It makes sense? That is being efficient instead of cutting a corner.
So in the case of the Moscow Mule,
Yeah.
after you get done shaking it, you would then pour it in the glass, top it with ginger beer, and then take it out of the glass, back into the shaker, kind of roll around and put it back.
I would do a tumble roll. So now I already know I got the proper proportion of ice and everything I need in there. So all I have to do is take my tin, pour it in there, pour it right back in there and serve it.
But you would put it in the glass because that way you can see how much ginger beer you need to, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you built it in the glass, and that's fine, except that...
You built it in the shaker and poured it in the glass.
Yeah, you built it in the shaker, and then ideally you strain it over fresh ice anyhow. We never use the same ice that we shook with, right? Right? Because that ice is now diluted and is smaller, but we got the cocktail to their proper temperature. Now it's nice and cold, and if we strain it over fresh ice, bigger ice, it's going to melt slower, and it's going to keep that cocktail tasting almost as good from the first sip to the very last sip. So the answer is yes, and if you built it in the glass, if you built it in the tin and then shook it down, tasted it for balance, strain it over fresh ice, and then put your ginger beer on top, tumble roll back and forth, and kick it out.
Do you double strain when you pour over ice? Do you use the fine strainer?
Yes, especially if you're shaking it. Do you double strain with a stirred cocktail? You never double strain with a stirred cocktail. Why would you? Because you're just stirring it and you're keeping those oils intact. There's no ice chips in there. There's no seeds. There's no leaves in a stirred cocktail. There's no reason to ever strain that I can think of, unless there's something to strain out that's, that you don't want in the drink. But the answer is no. You never fine strain a stirred cocktail.
Question. So you said you didn't want to put your hand to the drink, obviously, like you don't want to touch the cherry. What do you do about straws? How do you put a straw in a drink?
So, a good question. The answer is, it's a good question. There are several different schools of thought on that. My personal thought is, grip it about 1.5 inches. Yeah, I would grip it around here because I know that their lips are going to be touching that part. They don't want to touch that because my fingers have just touched it. But if I touch it right there, that part of the straw isn't likely to go into the liquid, and that. But the professional way to do it, especially in front of the guest, is to simply grab my garnish tongs, grab a straw, and slide it in there.
Even like the little one too.
Yeah, the little tiny straws. Yeah, and how many straws do you put in there? 1 or 2?
1.
Put in 2 of the smaller ones. You know why? because they can drink twice as much liquid. It's just simple economics. Let them, they want, it's kind of unsatisfying to drink through one tiny little, but if you 2 straws is just right, and they go, okay. Good question, by the way. Excellent question. Garnish tongs when you can. That's what the garnish tongs are for. Okay. So I'm going to make you guys 3 Manhattans to taste.
So you have had someone shake a Manhattan for you?
Oh, all the time. All the time. Like, more often than not. I think bartenders are starting to get hip to the fact that it should be stirred. But you guys were trained by that mixologist here, right? He knew better, so you guys learned proper from the beginning. But that's the exception to the rule. Most bartenders shake it down because James Bond likes it shaken, not stirred.
I had another question. You said if it's all alcohol, you stir it. So what about an old fashioned that you have like Demerara syrup? We use Demerara syrup in an old fashioned, and we stir that.
Okay. Oh, good question. Excellent question. Eventually I would have gotten to that, and I'm glad you brought it up. So in an old fashioned, we're adding a little bit of sugar, and that's a mixer, a non-alcoholic ingredient, right? So why am I stirring it instead of shaking it? The old fashioned is and by the way, you do a lemon twist over the top and not cherries and orange, right? Or no?
No, we do cherry and orange.
Okay, so that's the modern old fashioned. It was popular in the 70s. But the original old fashioned was just whiskey, a little bit of granulated sugar, and a lemon twist. And so we stirred it down to emulsify the sugar, because otherwise the sugar. But now we use simple syrup. But the original, we're still keeping the oils intact. We're using like a 1/4 ounce. So even though technically you could shake it, with a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup, the idea is the original had granulated sugar, and traditionally you stir that cocktail. The old fashioned is the only exception to the rule where you stir down the old fashioned. Unless you're using oranges and cherries, in which case you're muddling that, you've sufficiently compromised the integrity of the oils, you might as well shake it down. Might as well shake it down, because all the juice from the orange wheel is going to compromise the integrity of the oil. Might as well shake it down and serve it to them that way. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah.
So same thing, aviation, that's
Yeah.
a stirred cocktail.
The aviation has,
But it could be both.
it has lime juice in
That's
it.
shaking all day.
No, it's not. I've seen it stirred by other bartenders. I've seen it shaken.
I'm gonna defer to Brian on this one.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
So we have a rule now, so that there's no way of messing it up. And you called me out on the one singular exception, but I've explained to you why, historically, why that's an exception, is it normally has granulated sugar because back in the day they didn't have simple syrup, they weren't making simple syrup behind the bar, they just took sugar. And you had to stir that in order to emulsify the sugar into the cocktail. That's why the old fashioned is stirred. The aviation has fresh lime juice in it, ergo it is shaken 100% of the time. And if somebody stirs it, they may be a cool bartender and they may be a very talented bartender, and it may taste delicious, but they're not, unless, I'd like to hear the reasoning, but their stirring is superfluous. It really doesn't add anything to the cocktail because the oils are broken down because of the lime juice. The acidity in lime juice is going to break up those oils.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I've seen it done by like professional bartenders 2 different
Sure.
ways. So I feel
Hey.
like it's more of a preference thing.
Let's get something clear here. I don't say or do anything behind the bar without a reason or logic. And I've taught enough of these classes, and I've had enough of the questions thrown at me. It's very, very rare when somebody asks me a question which I haven't pondered and thought about and said, oh, that's a good question. I need to, what is the logic behind that? And usually, applying these rules, I come up with the right answer. But there are many, many professional bartenders out there who do not know all of these rules, who never got this training. So I'm giving you guys, it's not just, it's also very rare that I tell you something because it's the way that I like it, because it's the way that I think it's fun. If I do that, I'll try to disclose that. Like the way I shake a cocktail might be different than yours, and I'm okay with that as long as it gets shaken down. I like to grab the top and the bottom, back and forth, up and down, and I say shake it, don't fake it, and smile, right? Some people have the heart shake. Some people do, you know, they do the reverse shake. There's all kinds of different shakes. As long as you're getting the proper velocity and your proper rate of dilution, you can do your own thing. That's one example where I happen to prefer this method. Up and down, back and forth. But speaking of which, I didn't tell you guys how to separate a cocktail tin. Real quick. First of all, does anybody here ever do this?
No.
I hope not. So, have you ever gotten a tin that got really stuck on you and couldn't get it separated to save your life? Well, I'm going to show you how to get it separated every time. You see that the metal is touching the metal there. It's cockeyed. It's not straight down. It's at an angle. The metal is touching the metal right there. My finger is touching both. Whereas on this side, there's a gap. I can actually put my pinky all the way in there. So there's a big space there. Where the metal touches the metal, I'm going to grab way down low. If I'm right-handed, if you're left-handed, you're going to grab with your left hand. Right-handed, grab way down low, and the metal, where the metal's touching the metal, should be pointing towards the tip of my nose. Not this way, not that way, right towards the tip of my nose. I've gripped way down low. Then I swing my hand around 45 degrees, not to the thickest part of that gap, but to the 45 degrees, and all I'm doing is knocking the sheeter tin a little sideways. So I go like this, and it pops right out. Okay? And by the way, I'm not going whack. Look how light I'm doing that. And I've had tins that were like, the guy was like, and they go, here, and I go, and they go, son of a, I loosened it for you. No, maybe, but you didn't. It just got stuck in there. So practice it and you'll get it right every time. All right. Cocktails, let's make a cocktail. Let's pick a bourbon. Anybody got a preference? Nothing? No rare Eagle Rare. What else? How about let's use Basil Hayden. Basil Hayden's always fun to play with. And then we need some, what other ingredients are in a Manhattan?
Vermouth.
I got vermouth. What else do I need? Bitters. Manhattans get bitters, right? Right?
Yes.
Thank you. So, you have Angostura?
Angostura.
Excellent. We'll use Angostura. All right, so here's the deal. Mixer, modifier, base spirit. What are my mixers in this cocktail?
Don't have one.
No mixers. Bitters have alcohol in them. Angostura comes from the Angostura Straits outside of Venezuela. And besides, it's only one dash. It's really not going to compromise the integrity of the oils. Like Fee Brothers, I think, doesn't actually have alcohol in them, but it's okay. We treat bitters as alcoholic because they're just one dash. But Angostura does have alcohol. It has a rum base, and it's made from the Angostura Straits out of Venezuela and is now on the island of Trinidad since 1894. Dr. J.G. Segrett. By the way, interesting story. You ever seen that bottle of Angostura with that oversized label? You know why that label's oversized? In it was 1854, I can't remember. 1894, Dr. J.G. Segrett made these bitters, and he got a bunch of bottles, and he designed the label with all that information on it, because there's a ton of information. Read that label; it's an interesting backstory. And he ordered the labels, and he goes, "Well, my bottle is like 7 inches tall, so I'll order some 6-inch labels." Well, he forgot about the curve at the top of the bottle. He forgot about this curve, how it curves in. And so he ordered all these oversized labels, but he was a startup company, didn't have a lot of money. He's going, oh, crud. Well, I'm just going to sell this first batch with the oversized label, and then I'll order the proper size label later on. And he went out and sold them to everyone. It's like, oh my gosh, these bitters are awesome. They taste delicious. I love them. They were for stomach bitters, for settling your stomach, because these are amazing. And how clever of you, how smart, what a brilliant marketing to put an oversized label so yours stands out in the crowd. Everyone's going to remember your label. And he's like, yeah, I did that on purpose, yeah. And so he kept that label from 1894 all the way to today. They have that oversized label. FYI. Okay. Let's do for giggles, I'm going to make you guys 3 of the same cocktail. Okay, so 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Exactly the same cocktail. Now, I'm going to put in 1.5 ounces of Basil Hayden there. 1.5 ounces. Oops, I did my base spirit. Okay, even I make mistakes. I just put my modifier in. My bad. My bad. I got excited. Put that in there. What's that?
Don't get too mad at you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now for this cocktail, I'm going to do, I'm making an oversized cocktail on purpose because I want you guys to all be able to taste it. So I'm going to add a little extra here. I'm going to do the same thing over here.
How much vermouth do you put in?
I'm putting a little bit more vermouth than whiskey, and you'll see why in a second. And then this one, I'm going to use the same amount, but I'm going to use Martini and Rossi. Okay.
Is that something that you do standard, or is this a lesson that you're showing?
As a lesson I'm showing. All right, so now I've got 3 of the exact same cocktail. The proportions are identical. Do we agree? All right, now, this one is Martini and Rossi. So let me go ahead and get 3 martini glasses. 1, 2, and 3. Put those up right here. 3. Do we have a lot of straws? And we don't ever want to taste these cocktails, so let's get a whole bunch of straws. I'm going to add my ice to this. And I'm going to be, this is your typical bartender is making a typical Martini and Rossi cocktail. It's like going, hey man, did you guys catch that game last night? Oh, it's crazy, man. You know, Tom Brady, he's washed up, man. He's out for sure, man. I'm telling you right now. And we've all seen this before. Okay. The guy's like, okay, that's your cocktail. It's all, I shook it. Here you go. Next. Now this guy, I'm going to say, just for the sake of argument, excuse me, my mic just came off. We'll have to deal with that in a second. This guy's like, okay, I'm going to shake it also. I'm not going to go crazy. I just want. That's about as much, you know, if you walk into a typical bar, that's a reasonable shake, right? Most bartenders do that. And he's like, here you go. Oh, I'm putting on a show for you. There you go. Ah, it's beautiful. And then this guy, takes his bar spoon, puts it in there, and he stirs it down. Take a little bit longer to stir this one down. So,
Like, you're saying you don't want, that's not a good shake, right?
no,
He's getting there.
Okay.
He's getting to that.
that's the whole point of this.
Okay, yeah.
The whole point is I want to make 3 cocktails, one done right and 2 done wrong. And I want you to taste the difference between quality ingredients and poor quality ingredients. So even though we're using the same bourbon in both,
The vermouth will change.
the vermouth will make a big difference. It's yummy.
So which one's the good quality? The green ball?
The Carpano Antico Formula Sweet Vermouth.
Oh.
This one right here. All right, so. Where's those straws? Okay, great. So I'm gonna grab my and my cherries.
Cherries aren't out yet.
Oh shoot, let's grab those ASAP. Yeah. Beautiful. Cherries?
Gotta go.
Oh.
Hand for it.
Really?
Yeah.
No. You don't have any from yesterday? Nothing? Okay, the cocktail's going to die. So unfortunately, we have to be efficient and bypass one of the most important components of this cocktail, because a guest can't wait for us to open that. So we're going to go ahead and, that's my bad. I should have checked on make sure I had all my ingredients. That's my bad. Was that? Yeah, we can go ahead and open them, but it's you know. So I'm going to keep this low and oily. You see how creamy that looks? Okay. So first of all, visually, these two look the same, and that looks different. We agree on that? All right, this has Martini and Rossi, half-ass shaken. This has Carpano Antico Formula, half-ass shaken. This has Carpano Antico Formula stirred down to what I regard as the proper rate of dilution. I would actually add a tiny 1 bar spoon, like a half a bar spoon of cherry juice with that, and I would skewer a cherry and have it served at 2 o'clock. And these two, I just plop a cherry in there, just throw it in there. But either way, because that's what most bartenders would do. I'm trying to illustrate what the average bartender would do. What I want you to do is to taste this one, taste that one, and then finally taste that one, and tell me which one you like the best. And if you happen to like one of the other ones, that's fine, but do yourself a favor. When you're tasting these, keep in mind that we're used to drinking cocktails that are strong and sweet. So while don't confuse nostalgia for quality. Let me know which one tastes best to you as opposed to which one tastes familiar to you.
The flavor is different, but the how it feels on your mouth is huge.
It's huge. You get it out.
The oils of it, I mean, like you can really tell.
Oh yeah, here, hold on a second. All right, here. Now hold on a second. Where's my, most bartenders are gonna be like, here's a cherry. Here's a cherry. And then what I like to do and say, there's a cherry for you. I'm gonna go ahead and stab that. You got give me that was one of those wooden ones, thank you. That way, if the guest wants that cherry right away, they don't have to go fishing with their fingers at the bottom of the glass. And we always put that at 2 o'clock relative to the guest. And I might even stir in just a little bit of cherry juice. Boom. All right. Now, for my bartenders, I encourage all of you, I don't want anybody to get sick, and if you're germophobic, by all means, taste first. But those bartenders who wish, and I don't want anybody to get sick here, if you're okay with it, I'm okay with you picking it up and bringing it to your lips to taste it, because it's a different experience than the straw. But don't get yourself sick. If you're not feeling well, please be the one to take the high road and don't. It should, but let's. I want it. The last thing I want is somebody to get sick and coming after me. So Okay, first question. Can you guys taste the difference?
Yes, sir.
Guys, these are they're the same cocktails, right? Same proportions. In one of them I used a different vermouth, but that doesn't make a difference, does it?
You poured it high on that middle one, and you poured it higher, and it's got more bubbles now. What'd you call that again?
Aerating it, when you aerate it with by adding bubbles to it.
Basically ruining it.
Well, you're compromising the oil, so you're not getting as much flavor out of it, that's for sure. Also, yes?
And it's still considered like better, the third one, because it has like a thinner flavor compared to like the first one that's very strong.
I would suggest to you it has more flavor, but it's not as strong. It doesn't make you wince. But you're tasting all that bourbon, you're tasting the oils without going, you're actually getting the flavor out of it instead of the burn and the, right?
I can taste the oil for sure, like Easton said.
It's lingering, it stays with you longer.
It's better when you sip it.
It's better when you sip it, for sure.
Yes, it is.
Last time we did this training,
I
was
still
in the
thought it
middle
was
of
better.
COVID.
In the middle of COVID? Oh
Yeah,
boy.
and we still did the tasting, so
Okay.
I don't see anybody.
Okay, good.
You haven't seen us be something that dies out of the kitchen. When you saw it.
Okay. Hey, now go back and taste that one. Pick it, guys. If you sipped off that one, sip off the other ones. That is Martini and Rossi.
Yeah, I mean, it's like night and day.
It's night and day. Cheese and chalk. Right?
Try the first one after trying that.
Where's the rosé one?
You can really tell when you actually like pick it up. Yeah, JD, you can like.
What do you think?
Difference. I like that one.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well,
This is like it's more viscous on your tongue.
right.
Because the oils.
What is viscous?
Viscous means more thick and creamy.
Yeah. So when you taste like
Oily.
Like when you freeze Gregos to get.
Exactly. That's
Like when you
viscous.
make a good old fashioned, it kind of comes out like that, right?
Yeah. Yes. When it's stirred.
Stirring it really good.
Yes.
Oily looking.
Yeah. All right, guys. Okay. So, good. Hey, guys. I just really wanted to illustrate that for you. By the way, the first two, did they taste identical?
pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much?
A little different, I feel like.
I find that Martini and Rossi is a little bit more stringent, a little bit more bitter. So not only is it strong, but it's bitter. I like this Carpano is a little bit sweeter, but it's still strong. Guys, people will tolerate a cocktail. Where'd he take off to? All right, all right. Never mind. Oh, he went to the ladies' room. I got you. Okay. So, HR. So, guys. Here's the point I want to make. People will tolerate a cocktail that is too strong. You know, we've all had the cocktail where you take that first sip and you're going, if you crick your neck and you wince and your leg starts to shake a little bit, you're like, that is a cocktail that's too strong. People will tolerate a cocktail that's too strong because they feel like they're getting a good value, especially college students. Hey, I'm getting my drink on. Give me a Long Island iced tea. Hook me up. They will tolerate a cocktail that's too sweet, especially younger people like cocktails a little sweeter, especially in the South. Southern United States, they like sweet tea, they like sweet things. So the southern part of the United States and young college people, in my experience, like sweet things. They'll tolerate a cocktail that's too sweet because that first sip is delicious, but then it becomes cloying and filling and is unpleasant. For example, who here, by show of hands, has ever had a neon green, glow-in-the-dark apple martini?
Midori.
You make it with Midori, like a melon bowl, or something like that? Okay, so no one's used Pucker's apple liqueur and made a green apple martini? Oh, man. Don't ever do it. That's good. All right, who here has ever had a piece of Death by Chocolate cake? Really dense, thick chocolate cake. Okay, that first bite, you're like, oh my God. I just died and went to heaven. That is delicious. That is rich, dense, thick, chocolatey chocolate cake. Yum. You take that second bite and you're going, whew, that is rich. That is some serious, dense chocolate cake. You take that third bite and you're going, I'm not even sure I can finish this. It's a little bit much. I mean, I'll give it a go. But my gosh, you're getting palate fatigue, you're getting overload, and the sugar fills you up. The brain tricks your stomach into thinking that you're full. So sweet things make you feel full. And so that first sip may taste good, but it becomes sick and cloying. And you all know, you've all had something when it's had too much sugar in it and you drank it and just, I don't feel well. I just feel sick to my stomach, just gross. The acidity will balance that sugar out. And so the other thing they're going to do is they're going to nurse that drink for 45 minutes. Maybe they'll throw an ice cube in it or let it water down or thin out a little bit, or they're just trying to drink it really slow. You're losing money. You're losing sales. That was 2 sales in that 45 minutes that you could have made because you made a cocktail that was too sweet. Cocktail that's too strong, you're losing sales. You're losing money in your pocket. I'm not talking about Craig's pocket. I'm not talking about the restaurant. I'm talking about tips and money in your cocktail. We're going to get that in a second. If it's too acidic or too bitter, the guests, it doesn't taste good, and they don't want to drink it. They'll suffer through it because they're going to have to pay for it, but now they're kind of secretly a little bit bitter at you because it's like, man, yeah, that was a cruddy cocktail. And they'll pay for that one cocktail, and they either order something else or they're not going to drink at your place ever again. They serve a crappy cocktail. If you serve it too weak, if it's too thin, hey man, what are you, watering down your booze? What the heck? I want to get drunk. What the heck? But if we make a balanced cocktail in that flavor zone, it tastes delicious. Our liquor costs go down, which means John and Craig are thrilled because their liquor costs are down. The check averages go up because they can now order 2 or 3 cocktails and they taste delicious. No one complains. Every once in a while you get a college guy who's like, man, I want more alcohol, because they're ordering cocktails to get crocked, not because of flavor. That'll happen. And when that guy comes along, and he will come along, you just take a 1/4 ounce of whatever that base spirit is, a 1/4 ounce of that base spirit, and you float it along the top. That you just float along the top. And he picks it up in that first sip, he's like, yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about. And he's getting his booze. But we made our money back on the previous 9 guests who really loved a great tasting cocktail. And they ordered a second and maybe even a third one. I just tripled your check averages. That's tripled your tips. You're welcome. But here's the thing. I mean, I'm being facetious, but my point is more money in your pocket. The check average, the liquor costs go down, the house is making more money too, and the guest gets a better experience. Win, win, win. No downside. Nobody gets ripped off. Nobody gets cheated. Everybody gets a better experience. Get it? Sorry, I'm sounding preachy, but I just want to make sure. Now, another thing. I don't know you guys, and we're just meeting each other first time. I'm telling you right now, Craig runs a tight ship, and y'all seem to be pretty straight up good people. You work in a lot of bars, you work long enough, you're going to see people stealing. I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know you and you don't want to hear the preachy stuff about it. But I do want to say something about the economics of giving a drink away. You ever been in a bar where you buy 2 drinks and you get a third one free? Anybody? Okay, you have. Here's my point. What's that? Free for all?
Yeah, but, I mean, it's the same concept, but yeah.
Okay.
We do the best one, or like, if, we've all sat at a bar and someone's like, oh, he's a good customer, give him a drink.
Right. He's a good customer, give him a drink. I used to fight back with my managers when they did that. I hated giving away free drinks. Hated giving away free drinks. I still hate giving away free drinks, and I'll tell you why. Let's say every cocktail costs $10. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that every guest tips 20%. So on a $10 drink, you should expect $2 on average. We're talking about in the aggregate. So if somebody orders 2 cocktails, that's a $20 check, and I'm hoping to get $4 to put in my pocket that night and take home. But now I give him that third drink for free. Now he should have a $30 check, and I should be getting $6. But I gave him that third drink. Now, by the time he finishes that third drink, which is not something he didn't even order, which means he didn't really want it, but who's going to turn away free booze? So, oh, hell yeah. And he takes that third drink. By the time he finishes it and asks for the check, he even forgot that he got a drink for free, so he's going to tip you on the check. He's sloshy now because you gave him an extra drink more than he wanted. You overserved him because he knows his limit. You don't. And he looks at the check and goes, $20. Here you go. That's $4. You know what? You're my friend, and I thank you. Here's $5. There's a 25% tip. I just lost $1. I just lost $1. And if you're lucky and he remembers, and unless you're giving away the bar, which is flagrant stealing, and they're tipping you 20s under the table, that's just theft. We're not going to deal with that because that's just stealing. I'm not here to talk about stealing. I'm talking about the economics of giving away a drink, even when you got permission to do so. Don't do it. Don't ever give away a drink if you can help it. And if you can, you decide what to give them. Let's make a house limoncello or something like that, low in alcohol, something that's fresh and delicious, and you give it to them after you give them the check. You sit there and say, I'll take the check. You say, hey, listen, I want to say thank you for coming in. And you set that down. Now they got the check in front of them, and you give them that little extra something. that you have permission to give them, that we can control the cost on, that's fresh and tastes delicious. A little limoncello as on the way out the door. They can have it, they can choose not to have it, but now they've got the check in front of them for everything that they paid for. And you're getting your money. You guys with me on that? It's a simple economics. I hate giving away drinks. Hate it.
Would you pour it out before you give it away?
Oh, the extra, like right here, I've got extra?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like a double make.
And I never over pour. Yeah, I have extra in that drink. I had extra in there. I could have easily topped that off right to the top. Why didn't I do that? A, I'm losing a sale. And B, what kind of favor are you doing the guest who has to pick it up and slosh it on their hands? We all hate that. Or they have to reach over and slurp off the top. That's just not. Pour the right pour level. Never over pour. And if you got extra, dump it.
You also got to think you could have like a whole nother turn on that seat, and you gave them a free drink. They're sitting there for 30 more minutes, taking up a seat at your bar that you're not going to make any money off of.
Now you're thinking like a bartender who cares about the guest experience and their pocketbook. Always put the guest first, but hey, we're here to make some money, right? Let's make some money. Yes, exactly right. That seat is being occupied by somebody, and you gave them a free drink. Somebody else walks in and goes, this place is too crowded. Let's go to the place down the road. Absolutely. Okay, enough of that. We talked about everything we want to talk about. Let's go and make a cocktail off of our list.